Hello, my dear friends. Good afternoon. And today we're going to introduce ourselves to a new lesson, which is about conflict analysis. I will be presenting to you several video clips or video clips about conflict analysis. And I would like to state first the disclaimer that this is only for educational purposes. Okay, so hang on there and let us begin our lesson and let's begin our discussion. So once again, good afternoon, and I hope that you are doing well and fine. So sit back and relax. So perhaps some of you will ask the question, why should we be interested in conflict analysis? You know, there are pros and cons in doing conflict analysis, but if we really want to understand the meaning of maybe the nature, understand the nature of that particular conflict, it is important that we need to do some form of analysis. Although this process of conflict analysis is not scientific or it is may not be on the level of the rigors of research, but the data or information generated by conflict analysis will be able to help us some way somehow to make a rational decision about a particular conflict. And this is particularly important, especially if you are a mediator or you are in the field of conflict resolution. You should be able to communicate information to the parties in conflict. And it's important that there should be a clear understanding on your part of this matter, and that you should be able to convey this understanding on the parties in conflict. So let's begin discussing some of the reasons why we should be interested in conflict analysis. The first one is understand the background and history of the conflict. It's important that we understand the background and history of the conflict, no matter how long or no matter how complicated the history of the conflict. We should be able to examine both narratives. Parties in conflict develop their own narratives, they develop their own stories about the conflict. And it's important that we should be able to trace out these narratives. We should be able to understand why they develop that kind of narratives. What were the factors surrounding this kind of understanding? you know this kind of narratives may be biased, or this may be conditioned by the background of the parties in conflict, but we need to really understand this so that we should be able to trace out things and be able to communicate. And perhaps by engaging with the parties in conflict, we would be able to communicate this to both parties, and then maybe they would be able to find a common ground in their understanding of the history of their conflict. So second is why we need to do a conflict analysis is because we need to identify the relevant groups in the conflict. There are many different groups in a conflict. You have the primary, the secondary parties, the third parties. Later on, we will discuss the meaning of all of this. Who are the primary, the secondary, and tertiary party? So because the conflict tends to grow, it tends to mutate, and it tends to develop based on the interests and based on how these actors behave in the conflict. So as such, we should be able to establish the web of connections among these different parties in conflict, because by trying to discover the web of connection, we will be able to find the means and the ways to the means and the ways to shall we say develop or to solve the problem. Okay. The third reason why we should be interested in conflict analysis is to understand the perception of the groups in conflict, including the hidden ones, because the parties in conflict, whether primary, secondary, or tertiary, they have their own agenda. Especially this is particularly true if the conflict is among states and within among nation states. These entities are in these entities are motivated by their national interests. So you know the meaning of national interest. So they operate upon this concept, and so therefore we should be able to understand this particular aspect. Okay, now number four is understand the factors and the trends that underpin the conflict. That's why conflict analysis cannot be done in the longer term. It should be done quickly as possible, because the conflict is dynamic. So it's dynamic. It mutates, it changes easily, and sometimes the environment also changes so quickly. So therefore, the nature and the trend of the conflict also changes. So we should also be cognizant about this. There is no static moment in a particular conflict. So no matter how protracted the conflict is. So these are the reasons why we should be interested in conflict analysis. I hope that this is clear within our minds, and I hope that uh, this is clear in our understanding. So let us come now to the challenges and obstacle to conflict analysis. So there are actually four challenges that you have to grapple with, especially when you engage in conflict analysis. Number one is the problem of time, and the second is dynamics, then third, triggers, and fourth is behavior. When time is conflict analysis is time consuming. It's time consuming because you have to do your homework, you have to do your research, you have to do your own readings and about the particular conflict. So it may take time, and sometimes your study, your consultations with the different sectors, or the different resource person may take time. So time that can be utilized to other things will be wasted as a result. So you should be able to manage your time properly, and you should be mindful of the time so that you should be able to do your analysis in a rational way, that it will not be a waste of time, that it will help or provide information that will help in your negotiations. Okay. And the second challenge is the dynamics or the phase of conflict. As I have said earlier in the earlier slide, that conflict is dynamic, so it changes quickly, and things might change into a different direction. So the conflict dynamics may change quickly and could render recent findings irrelevant. That's why we should always be mindful of the dynamics of conflict, so that we should be able to respond quickly and adjust our own analysis. So it's better that we should be able to have a analysis A, analysis B, analysis C, because we should be able to create scenarios, possible scenarios, so that we can also provide alternative solution to possible changes, possible outcome of the conflict. Then number three is the trigger. Triggers to conflict may not have connection with the causes of conflict. So these are factors that might trigger the conflict, that are not associated with the factors that you have identified. Mga bagay-bagay to, like for example, um, economic problem or the economic status of a particular country. This might also impact the conflict. Then fourth is the behavior. Behaviors of stakeholders sometimes are difficult to analyze, because sometimes usually some of these people or parties in conflict may behave erratically, or they may be secretive, or they may not show their real intentions or their real attitude, or maybe they are concealing their attitude or perception for security reasons or for any other reasons that they think best for them. That's why, as a mediator or maybe somebody engaged in conflict resolution, you should be able to study all of this and analyze this kind of situations. Okay. Now, we should recognize that conflict is a social phenomenon, meaning to say it is something that happens within the context of people and within the context of communities. That's why there are four important aspects of conflict analysis that we should be able to understand. First is the people. Second, what are their issues or the core problem? and what are the context, and what are the process of response. So in other words, we should identify who these people are. So ito na yung sinasabi ko kanina na we should be able to identify who are the primary parties, who are the secondary parties, and who are the third parties in a particular conflict. So we should be able to identify who these are and clearly define, clearly identify them, clearly identify their objectives, and why they are connected to the conflict. Then the second aspect of conflict as a social phenomenon is the what, meaning to say the core problem. So if we look at if we make use of the illustration of the onion, so you notice that the onion has different layers, they have different skins, you know. So therefore, a conflict also has different skins. So we should be able to get to the bottom of of this conflict. If it is the onion, we should be able to get into the deeper recesses of the bulb. That means it refers to the issue or the core problem. What is it that they really want? What is it that they are really want? Because sometimes, you know, their positions, their advocacies, or their expression of their core problem may be different from the core problem itself. It may be it may be something which is hidden. That's why you have to discover and understand that. Then third is the context. When we talk about the context, we are referring to the where it is located geographically, and who are the people, who are the countries, what are the factors surrounding the conflict, and when did it happen. That's why the historicity of the conflict is very important, the history of the conflict, because by studying the history of the conflict, we will be able to analyze how it developed, how it mutates, and who are the people, and what are the events that influence the mutation or the development of the particular conflict. And by doing so, we will be able to establish the web of connections, and we will be able to synthesize and decipher the problem. And fourth is we have to understand also how the parties in conflict are responding to their issues. So are they resorting to violence? Are they resorting to other methods, especially etc.? Because that is very crucial in understanding the particular conflict. So if we can develop a framework, it is this way. Like for example, we can have a four-way conflict analysis framework. First, we have to understand who are the people or the stakeholders. The life and dynamics of conflict depend on the emotions, personalities, perception, cultures, and interest, and agendas and relative influence of the people in conflict. So stakeholders can be primary or secondary or interested. So primary, secondary, or interested. So tatlo yan. There are three stakeholders in a conflict. Primary, these are the ones who have a very important stake in the conflict. And secondary, these are parties who might be affected by the conflict. That's why they involve themselves. And the third is uh, these are people or entities that have no direct um, involvement in the conflict, but they stand to benefit or to lose in the outcome of that particular conflict. Then the second is the core problem. So the contending issue that results in the clash between the people is often multidimensional. So by resolving part one does not necessarily end the conflict. So problem sometimes has root causes and it is important to understand all the dimensions of the sources of conflict, because there are many different theories about sources of conflict. It can be because of a unmet needs of people. This is especially with regards to the theory of John Borton. Si John Borton, ang theory niya is that conflict aroused from unmet needs. And also, there are also those people who believe that conflict is also rooted in identity and values. You know, when the identity of people are threatened, it leads them to become defensive, and especially if it is about values. You know, because values are non-negotiable. Then also process. Process is how the parties are responding to the conflict. There are two main responses though. They are expressed in several forms like violence, non-violence. And process also changes over time. Either violence intensities or the parties can reason and turn to non-violent means. Okay, then also the context. This is what I'm talking about the history, about the geography, about the people, about the economy, and the cultural and religious background associated with the conflict. So we are done with the first series of presentation, and the next series of presentations will be the following. So the lecture next to this is we will be talking about contextualizing the conflict situation. Then second, we will be identifying the issue or core problem, and lecture 3 will be about stakeholders analysis, and lecture 4 will be about the process of response. So thank you for listening, and watch out for the next video clip.